Gain net de biodiversité dans le système de planification partie 3.
Biodiversity net gain in the planning system part 3.
Okay, good afternoon. Back for part 3 on this run through of biodiversity net gain, legislation, comments, really from a development planning perspective, as I'm a planning consultant, and contextualizing it from that professional point of view. So obviously the third video here, still the same day, changed the scenery slightly. You can tell it's the same day, my hair still the same length. Okay, I just want to run through, going back slightly to, not to legislation, but to policy or policy guidance. Just to flesh this out a little bit more. So the guidance on ways to achieve biodiversity net gain, and this is getting more sort of technically complex because you've got on-site gain, off-site gain, and then this emerging trading of biodiversity credits, I suppose, which is it's called statutory biodiversity credits, and it's recognizing you can't deliver biodiversity net gain on site, so using other sites that are being run commercially to achieve those biodiversity targets. So the guidance says, through site selection and layout, developers should avoid or reduce any negative impact on biodiversity. They must deliver at least 10% biodiversity net gain as measured by the statutory biodiversity metric, which we've discussed. There are 3 ways a developer can achieve biodiversity net gain: on site, within a red boundary. If they can't achieve it within the red boundary, off-site gains on their own land, which, you know, it's a farming unit, that might be possible. If they can't achieve it on site, constrained urban site, surplus urban land, they could achieve it by buying a statutory biodiversity credit from the government, but this should be a last resort. So just to flesh this out, a developer cut down some trees on the site. They must make up for this impact on the habitat as well as delivering 10% biodiversity net gain. Now, there's a debate about this. I'm going to add to this here because, as I understand it, and you know, I'll be honest, I've been advising clients from a beginning perspective, from a site assessment perspective, before even entering into planning negotiation, pre-planning discussions, or planning application, to remove disease, trees from sites, to remove unwanted vegetation from sites. Now, the law on this is developing a little bit, and I don't know that that is the right thing to do now, because with the use of satellite imagery and everything, they're saying, you know, with biodiversity net gain, we're going to go back to a date in time, and you're going to deliver on that. Now, that's a change in the law because you completely legally, provided your the vegetation wasn't on some sort of inventory. Well, inventory wouldn't matter, but it wasn't. The trees weren't subject to tree protection orders. There's nothing illegal or wrong about clearing a site of vegetation before the start of development. It seemed perfectly normal process, but got to be wary of this now, because if it's a statutory requirement and a date in time, there will be evidence that that has been done. It's yet another onerous aspect of site development. So an example, so a developer cuts down some trees on the site. They must make up for this impact on the habitat as well as delivering 10% biodiversity net gain. They must do a survey of the habitat before development and use the biodiversity metric. This tells us how to make up for the loss of trees and what they would need to achieve 10% biodiversity net gain. If they cannot achieve the 10% biodiversity net gain by creating enhancing on-site habitats, they must buy off-site units. Okay, there's a lot to read on this. I think the government guidance is reasonably straightforward and makes some sense until you start, as in the previous video, understanding why we're doing this. So some guidance on what developers have to do, and this is getting, complexity of legal agreements with offsite providers of biodiversity, so offsite providers of habitat. It's getting quite onerous, and again, it always works against the smaller scale or the mid-scale developments, because usually small minor developments or small developments are exempt, and it's always the bit in the middle that's kind of caught, and then that the larger stuff, the bigger development sites, well, you can have companies with specialisms with their own ecologists, may even have within their own company be able to provide the habitat on another location in the country or locally or whatever. So I always feel that these things are hitting the middle. And this is interesting because there's a statutory definition and then a definition and guidance about what a land manager is. And this is, a landowner, a farmer, an estate owner, a habitat bank operator, a facilities, property or estate manager, land agent, land advisor, local planning authority using their own land or local authority using their own land, and developer using their own land. Go back to school days. Who could have imagined career advice, career guidance that in the future you could be a habitat bank operator? Just seems to me that this is going too far. I feel it is just going too far. It's clever, it's digital, it's new world, new age. It's intellectually based, I suppose you could say, but it just seems too much to me. It seems too much, but that's the guidance. I'm giving you a statutory basis to it. I just want to say a little bit now related about protected species. So we were talking earlier in the earlier video about survival of the fittest and Darwinism, and what species are worthy of habitat creation and creating, what's worthy biodiversity and what's not. And currently in England, there are 18 species of protected bat, which again, chosen statutory basis for those, or guidance basis for those. Reptiles, protected, things like adders, obviously ecologists would give precise advice about which species are protected and which ones have to be surveyed and accounted for. And great crested newts, now most people have heard obviously and know about great crested newts. I have difficulty with great crested newts. We've been dealing with these, through development for 30 odd years. I'm not exactly sure the position in Cheshire, but I know in Staffordshire, great crested newts are incredibly common. You're likely to find them in standing water, in ponds, in pools, in standing water on sites. I don't understand why it is so imperative to protect great crested newts. I don't understand what is so special about a great crested newt. Maybe I'll need to do more research, but sometimes it feels they're almost like a biblical creature, and they're on sites in biblical abundance. I mean, you'll see this you'll know that there's great crested newts involved on any major site, because you see that fencing, that low-level plastic fencing, which is either keeping them in or keeping them out, or measuring the numbers. So it's either a process of measuring the numbers during a survey of great crested newts, or it's then they're being translocated. They're either being kept in a site or they're being kept out of a site. But that is specifically for great crested newts. And it seems so specific that this creature is protected and is of such great importance, and yet it's so abundant, and it just confuses me now. I mean, I should know more about it, but it goes back to my childhood and farming background, and the Brent goose was a protected species. So, properly protected species, you get into really serious trouble shooting Brent geese, and yet they were a biblical pest for cereal crops, and they could completely destroy a crop of wheat in early season in a matter of hours. And yet at that point, European legislation was giving them such a high level of protection. You had to apply to have a license to kill so many geese per year, and you were allowed to have so many guns to kill geese and so on. And they were a pest. They were a serious difficulty that would create a problem for humans to feed themselves. And this is where I become a little bit lost on ecology and protected species. So there's some birds under Schedule 1 that are listed. Kingfisher and barn owls. Hazel dormouse is a protected species. I mean, there's nothing too maybe offensive and biblical about the hazel dormouse, but I don't know why they have been particularly picked out. And then badgers. So they, in certain parts of the country, they are protected, and in certain parts of the country, they're treated as a pest, and they're culled in the recognition of the damage that they can do to cattle by the transfer of tuberculosis. So this is a minefield for planning, and I'm not sure that any of it should be. I'm not sure there should be a statutory requirement for biodiversity net gain overall. I'm confusing issues here because I'm talking about nature conservation of existing species, and I'm talking about creation of future habitats, but they are all related matters. And yeah, of course, the debate isn't going to end, but we have to be aware that as of the 12th of February 2024, biodiversity net gain is a statutory requirement of the planning system. Okay, that's all I've got to say for now. I've probably said more than enough. Okay, thanks very much.